Occitan, also known as Langue d'Oc, French, Langue d'Oc, by its native speakers, is a Romance language. It is spoken in southern France, Italy's Occitan valleys, Monaco, and Spain's Val d'Aran, collectively. These regions are sometimes referred to unofficially as Occitania. Occitan is also spoken in the linguistic enclave of Guardia Piemontese. However, there is controversy about the unity of the language, as some think that Occitan is a macrolanguage. Others include Catalan in this family, as the distance between this language and other Occitan dialects is similar to the distance among different Occitan dialects. In fact, it was considered as an Occitan dialect until the end of the 19th century. Today Occitan is an official language in Catalonia, where a subdialect of Gascon known as Aranese is spoken. Occitan's closest relative is Catalan. Since September 2010, the Parliament of Catalonia has considered Aranese Occitan to be the officially preferred language for use in the Val d'Aran. Across history, the terms Limousin, Languedocian, Gascon, and later Provençal have been used as synonyms for the whole of Occitan. Nowadays, Provençal is understood mainly as the Occitan dialect spoken in Provence. Unlike other Romance languages such as French or Spanish, there is no single written standard language called Occitan, and Occitan has no official status in France, home to most of Occitania. Instead, there are competing norms for writing Occitan, some of which attempt to be pan-dialectal while others are based on particular dialects. These efforts are hindered by the rapidly declining usage of Occitan as a spoken language in much of southern France, as well as by the significant differences in phonology and vocabulary between different Occitan dialects. In particular, the northern and easternmost dialects have more features in common with the Gallo-Italic and Oil languages, while the southernmost dialects have more features in common with the Ibero-Romance languages. And Gascon has a number of unusual features not seen in other dialects. There are also significant lexical differences, where some dialects have words cognate with French, and others have Catalan and Spanish cognates as mai, more, totion, sempre, always, etc. Nonetheless, there is a significant amount of mutual intelligibility. The long-term survival of Occitan is in grave doubt. According to the UNESCO Red Book of Endangered Languages, 4 of the 6 major dialects of Occitan are considered severely endangered, while the remaining 2 are considered definitely endangered. Name. History of the modern term. The name Occitan comes from Langue d'Oc, Oc being the Occitan word for yes. While the term would have been in use orally for some time after the decline of Latin. As far as historical records show, the Italian medieval poet Dante was the first to have recorded the term lingua d'oc in writing. In his De Vulgari Eloquentia, he wrote in Latin, Nam alioc, alici, alivero dicant oil, thereby highlighting 3 major Romance literary languages that were well known in Italy, based on each language's word for yes, the Oc language, the Oil language, and the Sea language. This was not, of course, the only defining characteristic of each group. The word Oc came from Vulgar Latin hoc, while Oil originated from Latin hoc elude, Old Catalan, and now the Catalan of northern Catalonia also have hoc. Other Romance languages derive their word for yes from the Latin sic, thus it is, it was done, etc., such as Spanish si, Eastern Lombard si acute, Italian si, or Portuguese sim. In modern Catalan, as in modern Spanish, si is usually used as a response, although the language retains the word oi, akin to oc, which is sometimes used at the end of yes-no questions, and also in higher register as a positive response. French uses si in response to questions where a negative answer is expected, e.g., vous n'avez pas de frère, si, jen accept. The name Occitan is sometimes considered a neologism. However, it was attested around 1300 as Occitanus, a crossing of Oc and Occitanus. Other names for Occitan. For many centuries, the Occitan dialects were referred to as Limousin or Provençal, the names of two regions lying within modern Occitania. After Frédéric Mistral's Félibridge movement in the 19th century, Provençal achieved the greatest literary recognition and so became the most popular term for Occitan. According to Joseph Anglade, a philologist and specialist of medieval literature who helped impose the then archaic term Occitan as the sole correct name, the word Limousin was first used to designate the language at the beginning of the 13th century by Catalan troubadour Raimon Vidal de Besalú in his Races de Trobar. La parladura Francesca Valmese, S. plus avenenza far romans e pastorelles, Marcela de Lemos en Valmes per favors e cançons e servantes. A per totes las terres de nostra lengage son de major autoritat li cantar de la lengua limousin queden negun autre parladura, aqui vos en parlerai primerament. The French language is worthier and better suited for romances and pastorals, but the language from Limousin is of greater value for writing poems, and canons and cervantes, and across the whole of the lands where our tongue is spoken. The literature in the Limousin language has more authority than any other dialect, wherefore I shall use this name in priority. As for the word Provençal, it should not be taken as strictly meaning the language of Provence, but of Occitania as a whole, for, in the 11th, the 12th, and sometimes also the 13th centuries, one would understand under the name of Provence the whole territory of the old Provincia Romana and even Aquitaine. The term first came into fashion in Italy. Currently, linguists use the terms Provençal and Limousin strictly to refer to specific varieties within Occitania, keeping the name Occitan for the language as a whole. Many non-specialists, however, continue to refer to the language as Provençal, causing some confusion. History. One of the oldest written fragments of the language ever found dates back to the year 960, in an official text that was mixed with Latin. De ista hora in Antia non decebra Ermengal filia celder de froterio episcopo filio Gerberganire mundo filio Bernardo Viscomite de Castello de Corn. No LLITOLRA no LLIDVEDARA ni no LENDCEBRA. NEC Societatem non ora, si per castellum recupera non OFA, AC recupera poterit in potestate froterio a Raimundo lo TORNARA. Per ipsas horas quae froterius a Raimundus LENCOMONRA. Carolingian litanies, both written and sung in Latin, were answered to in Old Occitan by the audience. Other famous pieces include the Boettus, a 258-line-long poem written entirely in the Limousin dialect of Occitan between the year 1000 and 1030, and inspired by Boethius as the consolation of philosophy, the Waldensian La Nobla Lake Zone, La Canco de Santa Fe, the Romance of Flamenca, the Song of the Albigensian Crusade, Dora el Beto, Las, qui non son spavia, Astra and Tomi de Femina. Occitan was the vehicle for the influential poetry of the medieval troubadours and trouberises. At that time, the language was understood and celebrated throughout most of educated Europe. It was the maternal language of the English Queen Eleanor of Aquitaine and Kings Richard I of England and John, King of England. With the gradual imposition of French royal power over its territory, Occitan declined in status from the 14th century on. By the Ordinance of Villers-Cotterêts it was decreed that the langue d'oil should be used for all French administration. Occitan's greatest decline was during the French Revolution, during which diversity of language was considered a threat. The literary renaissance of the late 19th century was attenuated by World War I, when Occitan speakers spent extended periods of time alongside French-speaking comrades. Origins. Because the geographical territory in which Occitan is spoken is surrounded by regions in which other Romance languages are used, external influences could have influenced its origin and development. Many factors favored its development as a language of its own. Mountains and seas. The range of Occitan is bounded naturally by the Mediterranean Sea, the Atlantic Ocean, the Massif Central, the Pyrenees, and the Alps. Buffer zones. Arid land, marshes, and areas otherwise impractical for farming and resistant of colonization provide further separation. Constant populations. Some Occitan-speaking peoples are descended from people living in the region since prehistory. Little Celtic influence. Ancient and long-term Roman influence. Julius Caesar once said that the people of Aquitaine could teach the Romans themselves to speak Latin more correctly. According to Muller, France's linguistic separation began with Roman influence. A separate lexicon. Although Occitan is midway between the Gallo-Romance and Iberian Romance languages, it has around 550 words inherited from Latin that do not exist in the langues d'oil or in Franco-Provençal. Little Germanization. The Frankish lexicon and its phonetic influence often end above the oil line. Occitan in Spain, Catalan in Spain's northern and central Mediterranean coastal regions and the Balearic Islands is closely related to Occitan, sharing many linguistic features and a common origin. The language was one of the first to gain prestige as a medium for literature among Romance languages in the Middle Ages. Indeed, in the 12th and 13th centuries, Catalan troubadours such as Guerau de Cabrera, Guilhem de Bergadán, Guilhem de Capestany, Huguet de Matiplana, Raymond Vidal de Besalú, Cerveri de Girona, Format de Perpignan, and Jaffre de Foix wrote in Occitan. At the end of the 11th century, the Franks, as they were called at the time, started to penetrate the Iberian Peninsula through the ways of St. James via Somport and Roncesvalles, settling on various spots of the kingdoms of Navarre and Aragon. Enticed by the privileges granted them by the Navarrese kings, they established themselves in ethnic boroughs where Occitan was used for everyday life, e.g., Pamplona, Sangza, Estella Lizarra, etc. The language in turn became the status language chosen by the Navarrese kings, nobility and upper classes for official and trade purposes in the period stretching from the early 13th century to late 14th century. These boroughs in Navarre may have been close-knit communities with little mingling, in a context where the natural milieu was predominantly Basque-speaking. The variant chosen for written administrative records was a Coney based on the Languedocian dialect from Toulouse with fairly archaic linguistic features. Evidence of a written account in Occitan from Pamplona revolving around the burning of Borough San Nicolas has reached up to our days, while the history of the War of Navarre by Guilhem and Elia, albeit written in Pamplona, shows a linguistic variant from Toulouse. Things turned out slightly otherwise in Aragon, where the socio-linguistic situation was different, with a clearer Basque Romance bilingual situation, but a receding Basque language. While the language was chosen as a medium of prestige in records and official statements along with Latin in the early 13th century, Occitan faced competition from the rising local Romance vernacular, the Navarro-Aragonese, both orally and in writing, especially after Aragon's territorial conquest south to Zaragoza, Huesca and Tudela between 1118 and 1134. It resulted that a second Occitan immigration of this period was assimilated by the similar Navarro-Aragonese language, which at the same time was fostered and chosen by the kings of Aragon. The language fell into decay in the 14th century across the whole southern Pyrenean area and became largely absorbed into Navarro-Aragonese first, then Castilian later in the 15th century, after their exclusive boroughs broke up. Gascon-speaking communities were called in for trading purposes by Navarrese kings in the early 12th century to the coastal fringe extending from San Sebastian to the Bidasoa River, where they settled down. The language variant used was different from the ones used in Navarre, i.e., a Béarnese dialect of Gascon, with Gascon being in use far longer than in Navarre and Aragon until the 19th century. Thanks mainly to the close ties held by Donostia and Pasaia with Bayonne.